Predation, predation, predation. Like a badge of honor, the California Department of Fish and Game website boasts that for several years, California has been the center of attention for producing trophy-sized black bass. In a list of the top 25 largest largemouth bass caught in the United States, 21 of them are from California waters. The question is, why is this a good thing? Deliberate introductions of non-native predator fish began in the 1800s and were meant to improve sport and commercial fishing and provide cheap food. Historically, the Delta had no significant predators, so that any level of predation now is greater than it was historically. Now, the Delta breaks records and is widely considered a quote-unquote world-class largemouth bass sport fishery. Largemouth were first introduced in California in 1891, but the larger, more aggressive Florida strain were stocked in the Delta in the 50s and again in the 80s to improve the value of the sport fishery. The plan worked. Currently, the Delta supports a popular largemouth bass sport fishery that generates revenue for the Department of Fish and Game and a substantial sport fishing industry. It's widely accepted that the Delta bass population has been increasing in recent decades, and data from Delta bass tournaments indicates that the size of largemouth bass has been increasing too. What about other bass? Striped bass were also introduced into California in the late 1800s. Recent sampling in the Stanislaus River has shown that a significant number of large striped bass migrate into the river each springtime when juvenile Chinook salmon and steelhead smolts are busy trying to migrate out of the river. This video was taken in the spring of 2009 and only shows a few of the striped bass were present at that time. Data collected at the Stanislaus River Fish Counting Weir demonstrates that stripers are present in the river most months of the year, and their abundance is highest in springtime when juvenile salmon and steelhead abundance is highest as well. This striped bass was captured in the Stanislaus River in 2009 by a recreational angler. This one was captured by biologists working on the river and had a partially digested native Sacramento sucker still hanging out of its mouth. Stripers can eat prey about 2/3 of their size. Their ability to migrate repeatedly between fresh and saltwater environments means that they can potentially prey on salmon and steelhead smolts in Central Valley tributaries, in the San Joaquin River, interior delta, the bay, and the nearshore ocean. It's foolish to think striped bass don't eat Chinook salmon, or steelhead, delta smelt, or any other fish they encounter. Many studies have found over the years that striped bass eat salmon, including this early Department of Fish and Game study where Chinook were the dominant food item in striped bass stomachs collected in the upper Sacramento River. Now, in a more recent study on the Mokelumne River, a researcher estimated Chinook losses due to striped bass predation at 11 to 28% of the total natural Chinook production for the year. Further, by combining positively identified salmon with suspected salmon from the striped bass stomachs, loss estimates were almost 100,000 juvenile Chinook smolts, or over half of the entire population. A number of factors challenge outmigrating San Joaquin River salmon and steelhead smolts. As fish migrate downstream in the San Joaquin, about half of them turn left and go into the old river channel, where they have a more perilous journey towards the ocean than those that turn right and head out and travel in the San Joaquin past Stockton, as we'll see in a moment. Overall, this area of the San Joaquin River is highly altered habitat dominated by uniform stream channel, little shallow water habitat, riprap banks, and little in-stream cover, all factors that discourage habitat use by native fish and favor non-natives. Artificial structures throughout the San Joaquin River provide habitat for predators and likely result in even higher predation rates on outmigrating salmon and steelhead smolts. Acoustic telemetry tracking indicates that fish are consumed by predators at artificial structures, channel scour holes, and the state and federal water diversion facilities. It's no secret where the predators are. Years of acoustic tracking studies, new research with underwater acoustic cameras such as the Didson, and basic observations of angler behavior are increasingly providing a clearer picture of the true extent of predation losses in the San Joaquin River. One of the areas of highest predation losses is the area surrounding the state and federal water diversion facilities, where a combination of channel twists and turns, artificial structures, and reverse flows favor predation over successful juvenile outmigration. Although many still claim that the striped bass fishery is in decline, according to the annual California Department of Fish and Game population estimate, there are still over 1 million adult striped bass in the delta and lower tributaries. We know big stripers eat big fish. In this case, it's an ESA-protected rainbow trout steelhead that was partially digested in the stomach of the striped bass captured and dissected by a Stanislaus River angler. Smaller striped bass eat smaller fish, in this case salmon smolts. In this case, these juvenile striped bass are preying on juvenile Chinook fry. Many studies over the last decade have demonstrated that predation losses are extremely high in and around Clifton Court forebay. For instance, loss estimates across Clifton Court have ranged from 63 to 99%, with an average greater than 85. Estimates of striped bass abundance in the forebay range from 30,000 to 900,000 fish. Now, unfortunately, about half of all outmigrating San Joaquin Basin Chinook salmon smolts migrate down the old river and have to face this high predation and the poor hydraulic conditions in this area. So who's known about this problem and why hasn't anything been done about it? This email from a California Department of Fish and Game biologist clearly acknowledges that they are in fact aware of the predation problem, but they've done nothing proactive to reduce predation rates and save delta smelt or other declining native fish species. So what do other researchers think? Well-published researchers from the Departments of Fish and Game and Water Resources note that, quote, striped bass likely remain the most significant predator of Chinook salmon and threaten delta smelt due to its ubiquitous distribution in the estuary and its tendency to aggregate around water diversion structures where these fishes are frequently entrained, unquote. So what does the National Marine Fisheries Service think about the predation issue? The National Marine Fisheries Service draft recovery plan for Central Valley salmon and steelhead concludes that 1. Predation on winter run Chinook salmon is a major stressor with very high importance. 2. That restoring the ecosystem for anadromous salmonids will require, among other actions, quote, significantly reducing the non-native predatory fishes that inhabit the lower river reaches and delta, unquote, and 3. Reducing abundance of striped bass and other non-native predators must be achieved to, quote, prevent extinction or to prevent the species from declining irreversibly, unquote. So what about other researchers and their conclusions on the impacts of non-native species? It's generally believed that bass and other non-native competitor fish were a major factor in the, quote, global extinction of the thick-tailed chub, unquote, as well as the extinction of the Sacramento perch from the delta. Perhaps a non-native species issue is best summarized by UC Davis and San Francisco Estuary Institute scholars who wrote, quote, exotic species have also harmed populations of rare and endangered species, and by continually altering the ecosystem have undermined the accumulation of sufficient knowledge to effectively manage the delta. This, in turn, increases the pressure for greater restrictions on water withdrawals to avoid further losses of fish populations, unquote. So where does this all leave us? Well, in June of 2006, the legislature directed the resource agencies to report on actions to address the pelagic organism of decline, or POD, to help stabilize the delta. In Appendix 1 of their 2007 report, the agencies considered many actions, including modifying delta bass fishing regulations to harvest the top predators and reduce their population size, the catch and non-release of introduced predatory delta fish, removing length and season restrictions, and reducing or eliminating the cost of a fishing license in the delta. Now, ultimately, none of these considerations were implemented, and no reasoning or justification was presented as to why not. What do you think?